It's great to see everybody today. Welcoming great friend and colleague Tyler Grubbs with me as always. And here we have today Tony Burge, friend, colleague, former student. It's great to see you, Tony. We were talking about before we started recording how long it's been. How long has it been? It's been a number of years, shall we say. That's
Yeah,
right.
it's great to see you too. It's gosh, going up 10 years.
I'd say.
I graduated college more 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wild.
so yeah,
Wild.
yeah, that's been a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a
So
while.
Tony is I'm just going to brag on you a little bit. Tony is a great thinker, is a very creative guy. Um, Worked in several fields, always a phenomenal thinker. Um, Always counted it that no matter what you did, I always could count on you to have some deep thoughts, and that's what I'm happy to have you on today to talk about some ideas. Going to go with two things. One is the great idea that we think, which we've been talking about, is the great idea that really helps life, helps people to live. Like to hear from you on that. And then, secondly, of course, I want to go over the one book that we had talked about, and you had shared with me been 10 years ago. But it's a wonderful story. It's a great perspective, and I want to, if we have some time and you have some thoughts on that, I'd like to dig a little deeper on that, because that's a phenomenal thought that you have, and I'll just tease the audience out with that. Well, that'll come a little bit later on. So um it, it's so good to see you. What is the thought that you're thinking today? As I'm coming to this, I'm always thinking that people have like these thoughts that really, I don't know, they might change per day, they might take weeks to change, but what's on the front burner of your mind and your thoughts as a philosophical, thinker today, as you are, that that's really coming at the forefront of your thoughts these days?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, a lot of it has been. So I have a 1-year-old now. I have a
Okay,
son.
that's right. Yes,
Yeah, his name's William.
I've seen that on social media. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
cool.
And one thing I've been thinking a lot about is because we had this podcast planned, maybe been thinking about where my mind was when I was 19, where it was when I was
Mm,
25, where it is now that I'm 30, going on 31, and how the perspective changes uh, and what you find valuable and important in life changes, even though you are still the same person. And
that's
I don't know,
interesting.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and even if you take it to think of your parents and grandparents, extend it that long in life, how many different lives do you live just in chapters in one life? And
Mm,
how hard it is sometimes to break out of, to finish the previous chapter to start the new one.
mm-hmm.
It's like a
Mm-hmm.
book you don't want to end sometimes, but I've been thinking about that a lot because like
That's
you said,
interesting. Yeah.
I've worked a lot of different types of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I have a master's in history, love philosophy, love poetry, and I love running outside. I've a lot of different hats I like to wear, and it's hard sometimes to figure out when you're in your certain chapter how to make room for all of those. What's your
Mm-hmm.
identity now compared to what it was before when you may have had a little more freedom? And yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. Basically, just sort of ideas on how to set up your life in a way that maximizes all of those things that you find enjoyment out of and value.
It's really interesting, isn't it, in a person's life? And I'm speaking, of course, as I could say in a man's life, but I want to include everybody. In a person's life, you have this a part of you continues, doesn't it? A part of you is like always present, no matter what age you are. You're at that age. Um, I always find it odd to be to reflect back to when, I was a boy, and think about like how did I come up with that thought? But I know that I did, and it made sense to me then, and it still kind of makes sense to me why I said it. But it's like I've grown out of it, but I haven't. In some parts, I'm still that same person, no matter whether I'm younger or young or younger, I should say. You have that one. That's interesting, isn't it? It's part of your life that remains the constant, and then you have all of these things that change. That's a phenomenal thing, because I wonder if what happens is that we get so attuned to figuring out, like, what is that new thing? What is it that we're going through, that we lose sight of who we are? It's like who we are, and mixed in with the accidents of history, or the accidents of time and space. And that's really a interesting dichotomy, isn't it? I mean, you were reflecting upon that. Like, I can see, when you just said that you had that master's degree of history, I remember that. I remember us talking about you after, when you were taking the philosophy courses, that you went on and did your master of history. And I knew you were into running then, and exercising outside. And so, and that's really interesting, playing the different roles that you have even now, that you're even a father, and your son. So William has that same thing, doesn't he? He's going to grow up, and he's going to have this one thing that is him, that is himself, but then all these accidents of all the different roles that we're playing. That's really interesting, of how to play that all. I know it sounds sometimes obscure, but we all go through that experience, but to bring those all together into a whole, and to see how they all play off of one another. I know that when I was thinking about, like, I've had various roles, of course. I've had various positions, through and by my training or degrees or whatever. But and now on this new venture of the podcasting and reaching out to the world, it's like I'm playing a different role, but I'm still on point with the same kind of ideas that I've always been thinking about. That one thing. What do you think has carried you through? What's the one thing that still maybe interests you, from the time that you were, in class with me, and now it's still interesting to you? And we're going to get to that one thought about your creative work, which is a fascinating one. But is there something that's like trailing along with you?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just all driven by curiosity. I think that's why there are just so many different things. If there's the right introduction, I think you could pretty much get interested in anything. Like if you have a really bad chemistry teacher, you're going to hate chemistry. But if you have a chemistry teacher that
Yeah,
loves it, lives and breathes it, makes
yeah,
you excited about it.
yeah.
So I'm pretty I'm pretty I can get into anything. I would say, though, honestly, since then, it would have to be long distance running in the woods. It's just like wringing the rag for me, just getting rid of the junk. I would say that's probably the one
That's
thing that's
interesting.
carried over. And then, of course, I was really into poetry then, philosophy, and I still read a lot of that. But that's definitely the anchor in most of my time.
That is that's interesting that you say that, because I've been thinking about some various aspects about what I've been doing with the podcast, and the starting of really an outreach. You could call it teaching, inspiration, call it what you will, seeking transformation. But those three compass points of wonder, wisdom, and the wild have chased me long years. And when I hear you talking about long distance running in woods, there's something very poetic and philosophic and wild about that. Wild in the sense of not in the sense of chaos, but wild in the sense of like the wild is that there's something very articulate and precise about that. That there is a it goes down to Carl Jung's point about that, and I read this interestingly enough in the Rag and Bone Shop of Poetry. It was called. It was written by Robert Bly, and he talks about that the animal. He quotes Carl Jung on this. He said that only man is crazy, but because the animal walks, and Jung was famous for the animal within us. You know that the recognizing that, and I don't pretend to know all about that, but at the same token, there was something very resonant in those words when he says that that only man is crazy because and the way I took it is only man can afford to be crazy, because the animal cannot afford that, and it must walk the ancient paths, it must walk the order, and so what you're going on is you're experiencing something really interesting with that I'm interested too, not only running but biking through the woods. I mean, that is, to me, that's a really rich experience that I don't believe that a lot of people capitalize upon, nor do they feel, because at that one point you are working with all of your burners. You're thinking, you're going along this path, you're energized from the physicality of it, your soul is allowed to think and to ponder, but you're right on point with that, and you're going along this path and you're thinking as you're running along. It's like everything is coming in there of human existence. That's really interesting. There's a deep philosophy that you're tapping into, and a sense of wonder too, I think, is there, because it brings a sense of inspiration for you.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. There is a problem with getting off the food chain. It introduces away from it. It's one of those things. Would you rather be blissfully ignorant or intelligent but have all these thoughts?
Yes, that's right.
And it's similar with animals. When your only thought is survival, there's not even a thought. You're just acting on surviving. And so once we found a way out of that and created civilization and had time to sit and think and ponder and didn't have to risk our lives to eat, it caused some problems. And I think that's something we still kind of deal with. And there's this, I'm sure you guys have heard of it. There's a huge book, and I think it came out like in 2009, maybe, Born to Run.
Mm-hmm.
It started the barefoot running craze. Yeah. There's this great line in it talking about how, humans basically suffer the same ailments as caged animals.
That's really interesting.
Depression, anxiety, neuroticism, because we are not expressing our physicality the way it's naturally intended. So it causes all kinds of different internal, whether it's mental dialogue that could be attached to the physical health. And I think that's what I discovered, because I wasn't a runner. I was very much against physical activity until I was in college. I didn't do anything. And so I was a really bad runner. Like whenever I was in school and taking your classes, I had just started. And but that was just something I had, I just felt something was there. I just sensed that, oh, wow, I am better now that I've done this. And then, of course, you get a little taste of that. You just get addicted to it and goes on to 50-mile races and crazy. Yeah, it's
that book you mentioned, Born to Run. I actually have it, but I don't remember that line. It's been quite a while since I got into it. that, if I'm not mistaken, it's in that book that he talks about the indigenous people of where is it? Isn't it in northern Mexico that they run barefooted?
Yeah, the Tarahumara Indians. I think
That's
they're
correct.
northern Mexico. Yeah.
That's a fascinating thought that they run barefooted for like hundreds of miles, isn't it? And it's this, man, that is so cool. I'm starting to wonder about that, because that, I remember when I first read that, that that sense of being in touch with the earth and the bringing on of the wild within us. That's the reason I put it within the three: the wonder, the wisdom, and the wild. I knew that they were hooked in, and I couldn't release that. I mean, I'd often thought about wonder in the sense of inspiration, and wisdom, of course, coming from the philosophy and the theological religious background. But then that wild part shows up, and I couldn't get it off of my mind, because I kept thinking about what I could do with that, or what I should do with that. Because if you have inspiration being the sense of wonder, and education being the sense of um, really wisdom and education going together, wonder and inspiration going together, it seems to be that transformation and the wild go together, because that's where we're transformed. That interesting way that we have of seeking out spirituality in the middle of nature, and sensing our own humanity. I don't think that we can lightly step around that. Excuse the pun on the running, but there's, if we go around that and we don't see that as essential, or if like a listener is not like thinking, well, I'm not going to run through the woods. Well, whatever you do, you could run through the woods, bike through the woods, walk through the woods. I don't care. But if you could go to the woods and do some physical activity, it will do you 100% of good. You'll leave different. And if you keep going back, I think you'll become more and more addicted to that very aspect of being in line with nature. There's something about that that is so I can't put it into words yet. I haven't written about it distinctly enough that I could actually articulate it like 1, 2, 3. This is what we're talking about, and and line it all up. Nor do I know enough about Jung in that one statement that even Robert Bly, the poet, talks about. But there was something that just kicked in. But he said, and this is focused upon the poetry book was actually focused upon men. He said, if I'm not mistaken, he does offer the line, "All boys are wild," and that's what he said. When we're young, and I know I'm not mentioning girls, but that's not the line. I'm sorry for that. I mean, I'm going to include all children, because I love to see the wildness of children, but he specifically offers that line, "All boys, all young men are wild." There's a thirst for the wild in them. That's really interesting to me, and I don't think we understand the role of nature enough, how that plays a part, and how we're always questing for it, because you can't really get there on a very manicured field, nor in a, and I'm not picking on anything, but you cannot get there over a video game. You're just not going to be able to achieve that.
I think an easy, because it's sort of anecdotal, but I think anyone can relate. There's a distinct difference in how you feel. I don't know if you guys have ever just caught yourself 2 hours later and what am I doing on my phone for 2 hours? You're just scrolling, and you feel so tired but not used. Your brain is done.
Yes.
And you could go onto a trail, do something strenuous for walk, run, bike. 2 hours, same thing. Your brain is in a totally different, you are refreshed.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it gives back instead of takes. And I think there's something to that. I don't know what that is, but I think it's probably what you said. There's just wild in us that we're not experiencing and expressing. And so when we give into that, it changes the way we think. So I know if I could feel one way, spend 3 to 4 hours on a trail, come home, I'm a different person. It's just a different thought, different outlook on life. The same problem isn't a problem after I'm done.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Everything's different. Yeah.
There's something about that that we're not tapping into, and I haven't thought long about for a while, because I too have experienced that. I remember several years ago, and this might lead into what I was, yeah, this is going to lead into it. So several years ago, I was running habitually, like several times a week, along this trail, and it would go up into the hills. I don't really know how far the distance. I would say a mile plus. But you know as well as I do that a mile in the woods is not like a mile on pavement. I mean, a mile in the woods sounds like, it sounds like the same thing, but it's not. There's, I mean, you think you're out there for a mile and you think, man, this is wildly longer than a mile that I'm walking on pavement. But so I used to have these dogs that ran with me. They were neighbors' dogs, and went through the hills on this one day. And as I started out, I noticed the clouds were darkening, and I thought I heard a rumble of thunder. And it, I thought, well, I'll just take the run, and the dogs were excited. You know, as I run past the houses, they would catch up with me. You know, it's kind of a cool thing to do. And so I thought, well, we'll go. I'll go and I'll come back and I'll be, I'll outrace the storm. So I got up to this highest point, up to the point where I turn around, and I could see this wall, like this mist over the tops of the trees, because I was deep into woods. I was up on a hilltop, but I could see this mist, this wall. And I thought, that's odd. and it was rain. And it reached me quickly, reached us, because the two dogs were with me. And then all of a sudden, lightning bolts started going off, and the thunder, and the rain, and the wind. It was like this onset of this surprise storm that just comes out of nowhere, it seemed. So the trail that we had gone on went down a hill, and it was a dirt track, sort of dirt. Well, it was dirt. Coming back, it had turned into just mud. And so I could get no traction. I was climbing up there. The dogs were cowering away from the sounds of the thunder, and I was yelling, barking out orders, excuse the pun again, come on, I was saying, I was just driving this home, we got to get out of here. So I thought, if we can make it into the trees, which wasn't perhaps the best thought, because lightning can strike trees, but at least we weren't the highest point, we wouldn't be higher than the trees. At that one point, we were off on kind of like it's grassy, kind of what became muddy. And we were climbing up. The dogs were cowering. We went into the woods, and I ran up and down these hills. And I ran through what became like ditches had become streams. The creek had become, filled with water. I just ran right straight through it. Finally got back home after that run. I don't know how long it took me. Out of breath, completely muddy, rain falling. And I looked up there and I said, wow, that was cool. And that's all I wanted to do, was to go back and do it all over again. Because at that one point, I felt truly alive, knowing that I was in touch with something within me that made me who I am. But I still retained everything that I'd learned. I wasn't different, as in that all of a sudden I'd become stupid. I was still articulate. I was still, well, as much as I could hope to be, but I was still as learned as, as a person. In other words, I still had all the knowledge that I had acquired, but I was in touch with something much deeper and much wilder. So it was these two aspects. It was like civilization, a human civilized, and a human that lives by the sheer wits of being the animal human. So those were coalescing. So it was mind and spirit, body and soul. It was I was talking recently and about, this comes from Nietzsche, about the Apollonian and the Dionysian tendencies. Dionysian being the wild and the Apollonian being the more civilized, the more ordering principles. And those two principles are the two forces within us. That's really interesting, that I felt on that day. And I sense that in the words that you're saying. It makes me want to get out and run again. I think I'm going to start doing this again. I planned on doing this, and this was just this was the kick I needed. I need to get back in touch with all three of those. I always have the sense of wonder just by being in nature. Wisdom, of course, in the ways I'm always learning about something. But the wild, that sense, I need to feel that earth. And it comes more from being out in the woods rather than being in a garden, which I do garden, but I need that wild flower approach. I need the hawk. I need the black bear. I need the wind. I need the star. I don't need the cultivated pathway.
Yeah, I think, talking about the enjoyment you felt after doing that, I find it very hard to believe. There's different ideas, of course, about how animals feel and think. But I find it very hard to believe that a bird doesn't enjoy sometimes just going loose, or
Absolutely.
like a deer doesn't enjoy sprinting.
Absolutely.
Whatever their capacities are, or a cheetah not enjoy the hunt. Like there's something about every animal just in deep. They don't know why they're doing it, or it's just like if you just let your dog out. Yeah, you just let your dog out. Maybe they do. I mean,
yeah. I wonder sometimes. I'll speak very, very. Well, I'll just speak very bluntly. I think that if we go so far as to say that animal, and I've heard plenty of scientists say this, or not only scientists, but lots of other people, that animals don't have this and they don't have that and they don't have this and they don't have that. I don't think so. I think they do. And just because that they can't communicate in the way that we communicate, I don't think that that means lack of self-awareness or like a lack of joy, a lack of wonder. Maybe I mean, who's to say that the hawk, which I see often, and I'll just sit and wonder, who's to say that the hawk doesn't enjoy the clouds that are above him as he flies,
I think sometimes we convince ourselves, because we really love thinking about how smart humans are, and that because we come up with good words about things, that means we know about them.
Yeah.
Just because we can identify and just have name for every single flower, that we know, that tells us something about them, rather than that's just our way of feeling more comfortable in our space by labeling everything. Yeah. And that because animals don't have what we know of as explicit words to explain themselves, that they don't feel or know, because they don't have that same language need.
Yeah, because they don't use computers. Then that means that they're not self-aware. I mean, how silly, if you really pin it down, it almost becomes so silly, because who can make a bird's nest? I mean, I do not know of a human that can make a bird's nest. I mean, I don't know. But yet they'll make different sorts of nests, and they know exactly what to use. I mean, we can make what looks like a bird's nest to a human and say, wow, that's really powerful. That looks just like a bird's nest, but it's not. If you hand that over to your local bird, he's not going to say, hey, thanks. He's not going, he's going to
We just make a house,
yeah,
a bird house. We just give
that's
up
right.
and not make the nest.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they will bring, I've noticed this by living in close to nature as I do, just the striking beauty of things, and the ability, the ability of a hawk to see at such distances, the ability to fly, the ability to sustain oneself. Just think about that. We think we're so intelligent, yet if even the electric goes off, we go into meltdown. It's the oddest thing, isn't it? Tyler, go ahead and speak to something. I keep on doing all the talking, brother. Yeah, I can pass over the mic. Yeah.
I've been a big guy my entire life. I'm not a runner. Never have. I'm not, I can speak to, as far as any kind of exercise, any kind of strenuous activity that's outdoors, definitely improves my mood, and I feel like a whole new person if I get up in the morning and I go through my 30-minute yoga session, my 15 minutes of meditation. I'm a different person. I don't drink coffee that day. But yeah, I'm not running for a mile unless something's wrong. Would like to do that. See about that. But yeah, that's a very interesting insight, and what can be made available with that.
I think the interesting, and just to give you some credence on that, you do pay attention to, exercise and things like that. I think what we're doing with that, in the sense of adding that idea of exercising in the woods, that we're reconnecting to something very primal and basic and beautiful and wonderful, that makes us human, makes us truly human. It's like, have you ever seen the film? It's a documentary, The Cave of Forgotten Dreams. Have you ever seen that, Tony? Tyler, have you seen it?
A long time ago.
It's Werner Herzog's work, and he talks about the cave paintings of France. And they're all of animals. They depict, of course, the ancient horses. Excuse me, the ancient cave bear, cave lion, woolly mammoth, of course, which is astounding. The various animals. They even have the hall of bears at the cave of Lascaux or Chauvet, I can't think of which. And we wonder, in our modern age, with all of our knowledge, with all of our history, 30,000 years removed from that, we still wonder what it is that they meant by that. That stops me, because excuse me, they were in the touch with the wild, that their essence was there, that they depended upon that. That was long before the agrarian economies. We're still in what we could estimate as hunter-gatherer. Not saying that they didn't cultivate, but agrarian ways were not, walled cities was not, that would be far off, thousands of years in the future. The ideas of cultivating to where you had kings and queens and people with a lot of grain countries committing war with one another. Not saying that we did not fight. It's just that this established warfare, what we call parts of civilization, quote unquote, they were we look upon that as being primitive, primal, not even a part of us. Like we've so much evolved away from that. Yet they had astounding, awe-inspiring art. They were doing art with that. That's amazing to me. That's what just makes me just spin in my thoughts, because there's something so interesting about that, so connected, that I wonder if in our ways that we have become so disconnected with who we are as people, as thinkers. And it goes to show you, that sort of idea that we have of connectivity that we're talking about in the sense of the wild and the running. I don't think you have to run or bike or anything. Maybe take a walk every once in a while, but certainly that strenuous activity is one thing, but it's that connectivity. Tony, would you agree with that? Is that something that you're thinking about too?
Yeah, I think I'm also fascinated by ancient man and woman and what occupied their thoughts every day. And I just think, especially thinking of that particular painting, they had so much fewer things taking up their attention except for the things that mattered, family and food. Like that was it. And so and I think it gives us an insight. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I know, but I like to think that it gives us an insight to what they dreamt about. Because you always see, because it's the animals, and it's also there's the stick figures of the people in the tribe. And you think, I mean, I don't know what their language was. I don't know how they communicated, but I could just imagine, a tortured poetic artist caveman just having all these feelings. And it's like, I'm just going to express it on this painting, on this lawn. Yeah, I don't think it necessarily I think a little bit of strength's important just in terms of expressing physicality. But anytime we take a break from recent development ways of distraction and just slow, because it just forces you to slow down. Anytime you're in the woods, and I've done some, I think the longest I've done, I did a 50-mile race, and
wow,
it's painful. And when you're on mile 40, you've had a lot of emotions go on, and it really, so having that go on within the setting of, I'm in the middle of the woods in Eastern Kentucky, it's as close as I can hope to get to feel what they probably felt on some desperate hunts or and just the complete physical and mental give up to what you're in right now. No resistance. You're just in it, and you just have to find a way to get out.
That's interesting, isn't it?
But, yeah.
But you always retain, and that's what I always have found beautiful about that. We always retain that sense of wonder. And I think that was what was in them is still in us. It's just whether it's latent or not. I think that's a sense where we've always felt ourselves to be evolving, to be changing for the better. But I think we're I don't want to be harsh with this, but I would say that if we're not careful, that we can devolve. Like we can go back, and I don't mean evolve from them in a sense, evolve from our ancient past in the sense of all of the things that we've been able to do, but we can devolve back into something that we know down in our deepest parts that we cannot ever be or go to, because that will cost us what makes us great.